Elias Ward was patching a fractured hull seam when they came for him. He was magnetized to the outer skin of mining platform Orpheus 12, one boot braced against cold alloy, gloved fingers guiding a welding arc along a hairline crack that shouldn't have been there. Micrometeor damage. Cheap plating. Deferred maintenance. His visor was scratched from years of debris storms. A thin white scar traced along his jaw where a pressure door had nearly closed too fast. His eyes, when the helmet came off, were permanently tired, rimmed red from recycled air and double shifts. Orpheus 12 was old. Just like everything humans owned in this galaxy. The gravity grid stuttered during heavy cargo lifts. The life support filters rattled if you didn't kick them every few days. Half the structural framework had been reinforced so many times it barely matched the original design. But he kept it running. That was what he did. He fixed things nobody else cared about. When the oxygen recyclers clogged, he cleaned them. When the docking clamps misaligned, he recalibrated them. When the council complained about budget strain, he worked anyway. Nobody important. Just a maintenance tech clinging to the skin of a failing station. He sealed the seam and listened to the metal settle. He fixes broken things. And somewhere beyond the silent stars, the void had just noticed. They did not dock with Orpheus 12. They eclipsed it. The mining platform's external sensors went dark first. Then the long-range scanners. Then the comm array fell silent mid-transmission, as if someone had gently pressed a finger to its mouth. Elias felt it through the hull before anyone announced it. The metal beneath his boots vibrated, not from strain, not from micrometeor impact. From proximity. He sealed the final weld and rotated slowly in open space. Above the platform, blotting out half the starfield, hung a vessel that did not look built so much as declared. Its surface was seamless black, threaded with faint lines of silver light that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. It cast no engine flare. No visible propulsion. It simply existed where nothing had been moments before. Inside the platform, gravity fluctuated as the docking bay doors opened without authorization. Elias removed his helmet and stepped through the airlock just as they entered. 6 figures. Tall, taller than any human by nearly a meter. Their armor was a deep obsidian alloy, edges glowing faintly with restrained energy. Their movements were synchronized, precise, economical. No visible insignia. No visible weapons. They did not need them. Platform workers froze mid-task. Supervisors lowered their eyes. The hum of machinery seemed to quiet in their presence. One of the figures stepped forward. A thin column of pale light scanned Elias from boots to brow. Human designation, Elias Ward, the voice stated. It was smooth. Neutral. Entirely without emotion. You have been registered for Sovereign Council Tribunal. You will come with us. Elias blinked. He glanced behind him, half expecting to see someone important standing there instead. Sorry, he said carefully, wiping grease from his knuckles onto his work jacket. There must be a mistake. There is no mistake. The words were not louder than before. They did not need to be. Around him, the docking bay felt suddenly too small. His jacket was torn at the elbow. A welding burn marked his collar. His hands still smelled faintly of scorched metal. He looked painfully ordinary beneath their towering silhouettes. I'm maintenance, he tried again. Hull integrity. Clamp alignment. Sometimes life support if we're short-staffed. Occupational classification is irrelevant. 2 soldiers stepped closer. Up close, their armor hummed faintly, like compressed gravity barely held in place. The air felt heavier around them, as if space itself leaned in their favor. Behind Elias, the station director appeared but said nothing. No resistance. Elias swallowed. Can I at least shut down my welding rig? He asked. A brief pause. Proceed. He walked back to the control panel and powered it down properly. Old habits. Nobody important. Just a human technician on a mining platform that barely passed safety audits. He fixes broken things. He just didn't understand why something powerful enough to silence stars thought he was one of them. The Sovereign Council chamber was carved into an asteroid core hollowed and reforged into something resembling a cathedral of power. Columns of dark crystal rose toward a ceiling that displayed a living map of conquered systems. At the center floated a circular platform suspended over a shaft of endless black, an artificial window into controlled vacuum. Elias stood alone on that platform. His work jacket had been cleaned but not replaced. The tear at the elbow remained. Grease still stained the cuff despite their efforts. In his hand, he carried the only thing he had been allowed to keep, his compact welding tool, old and scratched but functional. Above him, seated upon a throne of interlocking gravitic rings, was the High Sovereign of the Council. Beside the throne stood the War Commander, armor-plated in layered alloys harvested from extinct civilizations. The War Commander descended first. "This," he said, voice amplified across the chamber, "is the human anomaly?" A ripple of restrained laughter echoed through the tiers of assembled delegates. The High Sovereign's gaze settled on Elias, cold, assessing. "You are a stain on this trial." The words were spoken without anger, which made them worse. Elias didn't respond. He shifted his weight slightly, boots echoing softly against the polished platform. The War Commander stopped directly before him and looked down at the welding tool in his hand. "You bring implements of repair," he said, almost curious, "to a tribunal of dominion." He extended one armored hand. Elias hesitated only briefly before offering it. The War Commander closed his fist. Metal shrieked. The reinforced casing buckled instantly. Internal coils snapped with sharp, brittle cracks. With a final crushing twist, the tool collapsed into twisted scrap and fell at Elias's feet. Laughter rose louder this time. "He maintains decaying platforms," the commander declared to the chamber. "He patches weakness. He preserves failure." A pause. "You are nothing here." Elias stared at the broken pieces. For a long moment, he did nothing. Then he crouched. "Human," said nothing. He picked up the broken pieces. Carefully, as if they still mattered. Because they did. The council mistook his silence for humiliation. But humans did not shout when things were broken. They rebuilt them. And somewhere beyond the artificial void beneath the chamber, the real void shifted. The platform vanished beneath Elias's boots. He dropped through weightless darkness and hit solid ground hard enough to rattle his teeth. When he pushed himself up, he found himself standing on a jagged plane of fractured obsidian suspended over a chasm of moving black. There was no sky. Only a dim, swirling horizon where gravity seemed uncertain. Wind screamed across the plain, not steady, but pulsed. Violent gusts that tore loose shards of stone and hurled them like shrapnel. Elias didn't run. He watched. The gust hit. Then stillness. Then another gust. He counted. 1, 2, 3. On the fourth count, the wind returned. Not random. Cycling pressure differentials. He moved only during the lull. A blast of razor-edged debris tore through the space he'd just occupied. He ducked behind a fractured ridge, pressing flat against the cold surface. Alive. Not powerful. Just paying attention. Across the plain, black fissures split open without warning, exhaling dense clouds of particulate ash that obscured vision and choked the air. But just before each rupture, the ground emitted a faint vibration, a tremor too subtle for panic, obvious to someone used to listening to machinery. He pressed his palm against the stone. A rising frequency shift. He stepped away moments before the fissure erupted. The void trial world was hostile. But it was patterned. He scanned the horizon and spotted something unnatural, a metallic arc protruding from the rock face, half-buried and scorched. Infrastructure. He waited for the wind cycle, then sprinted low across the terrain, sliding into cover behind the exposed structure. It was ancient. Panels cracked. Conduits exposed. A lattice of dark energy lines flickering erratically. Feedback loop. The violent wind cycles weren't purely environmental. They were resonance discharges from unstable containment fields. Elias wiped dust from his eyes and examined the junction node. One of the conduits had shifted out of alignment, causing pressure to vent chaotically through the surface layer. He used a jagged shard of his crushed welding tool to pry open the casing further. Mineral paste coated the interior seams, dried and brittle. He scraped some loose, mixing it with finer ash and condensation from his sleeve to create a crude insulating compound. He packed it along the fractured conduit, realigned the node manually, braced it with a wedge of obsidian. The structure hummed. Low. Stable. The next wind cycle arrived. Weaker. More directional. The fissures erupted in predictable sequence instead of violent chaos. The world remained lethal. But it was manageable. Elias leaned back against the metal arc, breathing hard. No energy flares. No glowing aura. No sudden dominance over the void. He survived because he recognized systems. Because even something called void still followed structural rules. And he fixed broken things. The wind did not stop. It aligned. Elias remained seated against the exposed metallic arc, one palm resting lightly on the repaired junction. The violent gusts that had once torn across the obsidian plane now moved in disciplined currents, still dangerous, still sharp, but no longer chaotic. The fissures exhaled in sequence. The tremors beneath the ground formed rhythm instead of panic. The void was not calm. It was coherent. Elias closed his eyes briefly, listening to the low hum vibrating through the metal into his bones. "That's better," he murmured. The words disappeared into the dark. Then the hum shifted. Not louder. Deeper. As if the resonance no longer belonged solely to the machinery beneath his hand. The black horizon beyond the plane thickened, not darkening, but gaining density. The empty expanse seemed to lean inward, subtle and deliberate. Across the jagged terrain, fine particulate ash lifted from the ground without wind and hovered momentarily before settling again. Elias opened his eyes slowly. He hadn't triggered anything dramatic. No eruption. No collapse. But something had adjusted. Far below the artificial crust of the trial world, beneath engineered gravity anchors and containment layers, there was movement. Not awakening. Reorientation. The repaired node behind him emitted a tone too low for hearing, yet unmistakable through touch. It extended downward, beyond infrastructure, beyond the Council's classified systems. Into something older. Across the plain, what had appeared to be irregular rock formations subtly shifted angle. Not rising. Not advancing. Angling. Toward him. The wind paused between cycles, not frozen, simply waiting. Elias stood slowly, boots scraping against obsidian. "I didn't break you," he said quietly into the vastness. "I fixed the feedback." The horizon responded, not with light, not with sound, but with presence. The void beneath the world thickened further, like ink gathering beneath glass. The air pressed gently against his skin, not as pressure. As attention. Not the kind that predators give prey. The kind engineers give structure. Assessing load. Testing stability. Confirming alignment. The repaired system beneath his palm pulsed once more, steady and affirmed. Beyond the visible landscape, beyond the limits of perception, something ancient focused. Not by accident. Not because of power displayed. Not because he had survived. Because he had corrected instability without attempting to control it. Because he had recognized pattern in what others dismissed as emptiness. The ash settled. The wind resumed in its new rhythm. Elias stood there, grease still faint on his sleeve, breath steady in hostile air. And something older than the Council, older than their conquests, older than the artificial void they thought they commanded, looked at him. Not startled. Not curious. Waiting. As if a frequency long dormant had finally been heard again. As if the void itself had been expecting someone who fixed broken things. The hostile world dissolved into drifting fragments of shadow. Elias found himself once more standing at the center of the Sovereign Council chamber, suspended above the artificial shaft of controlled vacuum. The ceiling map of conquered systems rotated slowly overhead, stars glinting like trophies. The war commander stepped forward, voice resonating through the vast hall. "The trial of endurance concludes. Now we witness dominion." The first candidate, a towering Cyrix war heir, strode to the platform. His armor ignited with violet arcs as he raised both arms. Space distorted around him, folding inward like fabric gripped by unseen hands. From the black shaft below erupted a colossal void serpent, scales reflecting starlight like shattered mirrors. It coiled around him in a blazing spiral before lowering its massive head in allegiance. The chamber roared. Next came a psionic matriarch, slender and luminous. She closed her eyes, and the lights dimmed in response. A ripple of unseen force swept across the hall, bending perception itself. From the vacuum rose a many-winged entity of pure gravitational shimmer, orbiting her like a personal galaxy before settling behind her shoulder. Thunderous applause shook the balconies. A third contender, augmented and scarred, slammed a staff into the dais. Shock waves rippled outward in concentric rings. From beneath the platform climbed a horned apex predator plated in living metal, roaring once before kneeling violently at his side. Energy flared brighter each time. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for spectacle. Dominion confirmed. Power displayed. Hierarchy validated. High above, the sovereign regarded the scene with visible satisfaction. This, the war commander declared, is the measure of supremacy. Human designation, Elias Ward. A ripple of amusement moved through the chamber like a passing breeze. Elias stepped forward. No armor. No augmentation. Just a work jacket with a repaired tear at the elbow and hands still faintly marked by welding burns. He stood at the center of the dais. The summoning sigils ignited beneath his boots, intricate geometric patterns blazing in white and silver. The artificial void below churned, dark currents spiraling upward in anticipation. The chamber grew quiet. Energy monitors spiked. The vacuum shaft deepened. Light flared. Then steadied. Nothing emerged. The sigils pulsed again. Brighter. The void swirled harder, as if searching. Still nothing. Seconds stretched uncomfortably long. Elias glanced down at the empty black below him. "Is it delayed?" he asked quietly. The laughter erupted immediately. Not restrained. Not polite. Open and sharp. The war commander's lips curved faintly. As expected. The sovereign leaned back in the gravitic throne. "Tear insignificant," they murmured. The laughter rolled across the chamber again, louder now. Elias stood alone at the center of a ceremony built for dominance. And nothing happened. The laughter stopped. Not faded. Stopped. It was as if the sound had been cut from existence mid-breath. Thousands of voices silenced in perfect, unnatural synchronization. Even the echo died before it could form. Elias hadn't moved. The summoning sigils beneath his boots flickered once. Then every instrument in the sovereign chamber failed. Not overloaded. Failed. Energy monitors shattered into cascading shards of light. The hovering gravitic projectors sparked and split down their cores. Diagnostic glyphs dissolved into static before blinking out entirely. The instruments did not spike. They shattered. Across the chamber, the bonded void beasts reacted first. The colossal serpent recoiled, coils tightening defensively around its war heir. Its mirror scales dimmed. The gravitational entity behind the matriarch unraveled, wings folding inward as it lowered its luminous form toward the platform. The horned predator backed away, claws scraping against the dais, its roar dying into a trembling growl. Every creature turned toward the human. The artificial void beneath the platform deepened. Not darker. Deeper. The black shaft ceased to behave like absence. It became presence. A thin fracture split the space directly behind Elias. No explosion. No shockwave. Just a line, perfect and absolute, where reality conceded. The ceiling map of conquered systems flickered as stars blinked out one by one. The fracture widened silently. From within it rose something that did not fit scale. It was not merely vast, it was foundational. A shape woven of starless night and faint, ancient constellations that no living species had charted. Symbols older than council history burned softly across its surface. Recognition rippled through the sovereign's expression. Myth. Pre-council. Unbound. The first void. It emerged fully into the chamber. It did not roar. It did not flare. It did not project dominance. It lowered itself. Slowly. Deliberately. Before the entire council. It knelt. No energy tether formed. No bond mark ignited. It did not align under command. It submitted. The difference was unmistakable. Elias blinked up at the immense presence behind him, confusion plain on his grease-stained face. He had not summoned it. He had not claimed it. Yet the oldest myth of the void had bent the knee. To a human the council had mocked. No proclamation followed the kneeling. No decree from the sovereign. No triumphant surge of energy. Only silence. The first void remained lowered behind Elias, vast enough to swallow the architecture of the chamber without effort. The bonded beasts stayed bowed, instincts overriding pride. Even the war commander did not dare move. Elias stood there, grease faintly marking his sleeve, eyes squinting up at something older than language. "I didn't ask for that," he muttered. That was the fracture in the council's certainty. They believed power was vertical. From sovereign to commander. From commander to beast. From beast to the conquered. Dominion proved worth. Control proved supremacy. But the first void had not responded to command. It had responded to alignment. Every power in the galaxy was a reflection. The serpent reflected predation. The gravitational entity reflected manipulation. The horned apex reflected force. They were mirrors of fragments, specializations of cosmic law. Humans carried something older. Not strength. Not psychic brilliance. Not biological perfection. Foundation. They repaired failing structures instead of abandoning them. They stabilized collapsing systems instead of exploiting them. They endured pressure that shattered empires, and then rebuilt in the aftermath. Where others mastered power, humans maintained it. Where others conquered space, humans kept it functional. The void was not chaos. It was structure too vast to be easily seen. And Elias, kneeling beside misaligned conduits on a hostile world, had done something profoundly simple. He had corrected instability. Without ritual. Without dominance. Without claiming ownership. The first void had not bowed to power. It had recognized the original pattern. All supremacy was temporary architecture. Humans were the maintenance beneath it. Every power in the galaxy was a reflection. Humans carried the original. And something ancient had finally answered back. I prefer this response. The kneeling of the first void was sealed from public record within minutes. By the next cycle, the Sovereign Council convened in a chamber shielded from stellar observation, carved deep within the asteroid's core. No external transmissions. No witnesses beyond the ruling tiers. The Sovereign stood at the center. "This anomaly cannot stand," they said. A war minister struck the floor with a staff of compressed gravity. "It is not anomaly. It is inversion." "The first void does not kneel," another elder whispered. "It has never bowed." A projection shimmered above the chamber floor. Elias Ward, grease-stained, blinking in confusion as the mythic entity lowered itself behind him. Silence stretched thin. "He is a vector," one counselor said. "A weapon," corrected the war minister. The words settled heavily in the air. If the void responds to him, the sovereign continued slowly, then he represents structural override. "Then we contain him," the war minister snapped. "Isolate. Study. Replicate." No vote was taken. Containment was ordered. Elias was escorted, firmly but without visible force, into a null-gravity suppression chamber etched with ancient dampening sigils. The air inside felt thick, compressed. Energy fields overlapped in layered frequencies designed to disrupt resonance. He looked around and sighed softly. "Overbuilt," he muttered. The suppressor fields intensified. Pressure pushed inward from all directions. Above, the council monitored energy readings. Output at 70%. Increase to full containment. The fields surged. Elias winced, not in fear, but in discomfort. The harmonics were wrong. He could feel it in his jaw, in the ache behind his eyes. The layered frequencies were interfering with one another, creating oscillations that would eventually fracture their own lattice. "That's going to crack," he said to no one in particular. "Maintain pressure," the war minister ordered. The suppressors rose to maximum. Elias instinctively braced both palms against the nearest wall, like steadying a shaking bulkhead on Orpheus, 12. He adjusted his footing, shifted his weight. Not focusing, not summoning, correcting. The harmonic interference aligned. The chamber's frequencies snapped into coherent phase. Above, monitoring arrays exploded into white static. The containment field did not burst. It stabilized into something far beyond its designed parameters. The null gravity dissolved gently around him, falling away like mist. "He is interfacing," one elder whispered. "He is rewriting field law," another replied. Elias blinked as the pressure vanished. He hadn't attacked. He hadn't resisted. He had simply fixed what was misaligned. Behind him, space rippled faintly. The silhouette of the first void shimmered for the briefest moment, present but restrained. In the council chamber, fear finally replaced arrogance. "He does not conquer," the sovereign said quietly. "No," the war minister answered. "He corrects." And that was more dangerous than war. The sovereign war fleet assembled in orbit. Dread vessels ringed the asteroid capital in layered formation. Gravity lances charged in silent synchronization. Void beasts prowled along armored hulls, restless beneath their commanders. Containment had failed. Now they prepared for eradication. Below, on the open dais of the council chamber, exposed now to raw space after the artificial ceiling had retracted, Elias Ward stood alone. No restraints. No weapon. No armor. Just a torn work jacket and hands scarred from welding arcs. He looked up at the fleet. He did not shout. He did not issue demands. He did not threaten. He simply stood. Balanced. Present. Behind him, the air thinned. Not violently. Not dramatically. It deepened. The first void manifested first, its immense silhouette unfolding like night reclaiming the sky. Then another presence gathered beyond it. Older. Colder. Vaster. More fractures opened, not cracks of destruction, but seams of recognition. Shapes formed within them, entities of ancient darkness aligning in silent formation. They did not crowd him. They positioned themselves behind him, like pillars behind a foundation stone. In orbit, targeting systems locked. Energy readings spiked, then faltered. Weapon cores reported harmonic misalignment. Gravitic lances powered down automatically, safety protocols overriding firing sequences that no longer made structural sense. Void beasts aboard the dread vessels lowered themselves instinctively, claws scraping against metal plating. Their bonded commanders felt the shift ripple through their nervous systems, submission not to Elias's will, but to something deeper than hierarchy. No explosion followed. No clash of titanic forces. Only stillness. The fleet dimmed, one vessel at a time. Power levels dropped to standby. Elias exhaled slowly. He didn't command the void. He didn't claim dominion. He didn't even fully understand what stood behind him. But he stood fully. Without fear. Without aggression. Without bending. The sovereign watched from orbit, voice barely audible. He does not attack. The war minister swallowed. He does not need to. And in that quiet, devastating realization, the fleet recognized. Power had met its foundation, and chosen not to break against it. Elias Ward was patching a fractured hull seam when they stopped calling him Anomaly. Orpheus, 12 hadn't changed. The gravity grid still hiccuped when or haulers latched on too hard. The life support filters still rattled if you didn't tap the casing twice in the right spot. The outer hull still collected microfractures from debris fields no one budgeted to avoid. Just like everything humans owned in this galaxy. Elias stood magnetized to the platform's exterior skin, welding torch humming in his gloved hand. A thin line of molten alloy traced along the crack as he sealed it carefully, listening to the vibration of the metal through his boots. Above the mining platform, sovereign vessels sometimes passed now. They did not interfere. They did not summon him. They simply adjusted course. Reports had circulated quietly through interstellar channels. Fleet doctrines rewritten. Council protocols amended. The phrase structural variable, human had entered classified archives. Elias didn't read those reports. He was busy. The weld line cooled unevenly. He adjusted the torch angle by instinct, smoothing the seam before it hardened brittle. A junior tech's voice crackled over comms. Pressure fluctuation on ring 3, Elias. Yeah, he replied calmly. "I can feel it." He finished the external seal and cycled back through the airlock, removing his helmet. His eyes were tired as ever. A faint grease smudge streaked his cheek. Nobody important. Just maintenance. He walked to Ring 3 and opened the access panel. A coolant regulator had drifted 0.5 millimeter out of alignment, enough to cause resonance in the flow system. He adjusted it gently. Across the galaxy, fleets no longer fired first when encountering instability. Apex beasts hesitated before asserting dominance. The void remained quiet, but present, like deep water at rest. Elias tightened the coupling ring. The vibration smoothed. Flow normalized. A tech standing nearby hesitated before asking, "Is it true that the void still answers you?" Elias wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better cycles. "It doesn't answer me," he said. "It answers imbalance. And if something big breaks..." He looked at the regulator, listening to the steady hum. "Then someone fixes it." He closed the panel. No throne awaited him. No crown. No dominion over stars. Just a maintenance log blinking overdue and a station that would fall apart without constant attention. He picked up his repaired welding tool, the casing still warped from where it had been crushed and reforged. He tightened the final bolt. Because no matter how many councils had fallen silent, no matter how many ancient beings had knelt, he was still a man clinging to the side of an aging mining platform. He fixed broken things. And the galaxy had been broken for a very long time.